Chapter 2. Fracture. Aleric didn't sleep. Not really. He drifted somewhere between exhaustion and awareness, curled beneath a warped awning behind an abandoned tannery, where the wind carried the sour scent of old hides, and the rain dripped from a broken gutter above. His coat was still damp. The bread sat like a stone in his gut, but his thoughts wouldn't still. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mage's runes, the way they hung in the air, pulsing like a heartbeat, the precision, the intent. He hadn't just been spotted. He'd been hunted. He shifted, sitting up. The alley was still quiet, though the pale gray light filtering through the cloud bank told him dawn was close. Somewhere nearby, a cart creaked over cobblestones, and a dog barked once, then fell silent. He wiped the grit from his eyes. He needed a plan. The market was no longer safe. That much was obvious, and he couldn't keep running blind. If he wanted to survive, he needed to know why the guild had sent someone after him. It wasn't like this was the first time he'd pulled karma in public. Hell, the whole city practically ran on ambient chance. Spilled drinks, missed steps, last-minute dodges. He was careful. Always had been. So why now? He stood slowly, joints stiff, and glanced toward the rooftops. Rain still fell in a light mist, coating the bricks in a thin sheen. He pulled his hood over his head and started walking. If the guild wanted him gone, they wouldn't stop at a warning shot. He had to move fast, and he knew exactly who to ask first. As Aleric's feet carried him through winding back alleys and quiet streets, each turn growing more unfamiliar as he distanced himself from the market. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and stale smoke. He'd been here before, though it had been years. The narrow building ahead looked unchanged, its crooked wooden door, chip sign, and the faint hum of restless energy inside. Even if he had wanted to turn back, there was nowhere else he could think to go. He knocked once, then twice, too quickly. His nerves were fraying at the edges, but that was nothing new. The door creaked open, revealing the dim interior. Aleric stepped in without waiting for an invitation, his eyes adjusting to the low light as his mind went over what he'd just barely escaped. Oren Thorne stood behind a cluttered table, papers and half-finished scrolls scattered like the wreckage of 1,000 abandoned thoughts. The man was older than Aleric remembered, more tired, more weathered. His black cloak hung loosely, as if he couldn't be bothered to adjust it anymore. He didn't even look surprised at seeing Aleric, instead offering a thin smile that seemed more weary than welcoming.
"Never thought I'd see you again,"
Oren said, his voice rough, like gravel being ground underfoot. Aleric didn't answer right away. He felt his stomach twist, that familiar guilt rising. But he couldn't let himself hesitate, not now. "The guild's looking for me," he said without preamble, the words heavy in the air. "I need to know why." Oren's smile faltered, and he slowly ran a hand through his unkempt hair.
"You've always had a way of attracting trouble, haven't you?"
Aleric bristled at the remark, but Oren didn't wait for him to respond.
"Sit,"
Oren ordered, gesturing to a rickety chair beside the table.
"I'll get us some drinks, and we'll figure out what mess you've gotten yourself into this time."
Aleric hesitated, then sat, the weight of his exhaustion finally catching up to him. As Oren shuffled around the cluttered space, gathering bottles and dusty glassware, Aleric couldn't shake the feeling that the former professor knew more than he was letting on. Oren returned a minute later, carrying 2 battered tin cups. He slid one across the table toward Aleric and sank heavily into the opposite chair, swirling the murky contents of his own. Aleric reached for his drink. His fingers brushed the cup, and somehow it tipped, clattering sideways and spilling a thin, bitter-smelling liquid across the table. He blinked, thrown for a heartbeat. He had pretty high natural karma. Even without trying, stupid things like that didn't happen to him. Unless... His eyes widened and shot to Orin's face. The old mage was watching him with a sad smile, and let out a sigh.
Well, look at that.
Orin drawled.
Still too damn lucky for your own good.
Aleric's stomach tightened. Poison. It had to have been poisoned. He pushed back from the table instinctively, but Orin didn't move. Didn't need to. The heavy inevitability of it was already sinking in.
You shouldn't have come here, boy,
Orin said almost gently.
I'm too old to be caught harboring a liability.
Aleric's pulse was hammering in his ears. They sent you, he said, voice hollow. Orin shook his head once, slow.
Didn't have to. The guild's been cleaning house. Thieves, corrupt politicians, rogue mages, anyone who might cause a stir once the new laws come down. You showing up here, it just made the choice easier.
Outside, faint over the patter of rain, came the unmistakable clink of armored boots on stone.
They're already here,
Orin said quietly.
You've got 30 seconds, maybe less.
Aleric's hands curled into fists. Rage, fear, betrayal, all of it tangled up in his chest. I thought you were better than them, he said, voice low. Orin gave him a look that was almost pity.
I was, he said. Once doesn't pay the rent.
Then he leaned back in his chair as if the conversation was already over. Aleric didn't wait for the rest. He spun and bolted for the back door. He barely made it 2 steps before the floor lit up beneath him. A rune circle etched into the stone, flaring to life in a sudden pulse of gold. His body locked up, limbs frozen mid-motion. I can't move. The door slammed open. A figure stood in the threshold, tall and calm, draped in a crimson cloak traced with gold. The insignia of the Empire gleamed over his heart, an impossible presence in a place like this. 2 guards flanked him, head to toe in burnished plate, weapons already drawn. Aleric's breath caught in his throat. Not the guild, not the city watch, the Empire. They had sent a mage of the Empire after him. He couldn't understand it. He hadn't done anything that would get someone like this after him. The Empire reserved its official mages for dangerous rogues and terrorists, not orphans who barely used their powers. The red-cloaked mage stepped forward. His boots rang against the stone with slow, deliberate steps. He didn't even bother to raise a weapon. He didn't have to. Aleric tried to move, to speak, anything, but the binding spell crushed the breath from his lungs. He could barely force out a whisper. The mage studied him a moment longer, as if confirming something. Then he turned slightly toward the guards without even glancing back at Aleric.
Bring him,
he said simply. The guards moved in. Panic jolted through Aleric like a blade. No, he wasn't going to be dragged away like this. He wasn't going to... Something inside him cracked, fractured. He felt the current shift around him, wild, raw, uncontrolled. Karma flooded outward, invisible but sharp as broken glass, lashing against the binding spell. The wooden floor sagged just a little, but enough for one of the runes to deform, causing the binding circle to flicker out. Aleric staggered free, legs half numb, heart hammering as the spell sputtered and collapsed in a hiss of broken light. Shouts erupted behind him as the guards lunged. He didn't plan, didn't think. He grabbed the nearest thing, a rusted iron bar leaning against the wall, and hurled it blindly behind him. It clattered into the path of the nearest guard, sending him sprawling. Aleric ran. He hit the rain-slicked alley at a dead sprint, boots skidding on the stones, his pulse roaring in his ears. He staggered into the heavy mist, heart hammering, lungs burning. And his foot caught on a loose stone. For one stupid second he stumbled, arms pinwheeling wildly. He should have caught himself. He always caught himself. But the current of karma around him, wild, cracked, fraying, twisted instead of lifting him. The world tilted. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of him in a single ragged gasp. A shadow fell over him before he could scramble up. The red-cloaked mage stepped into view, slow and certain, boots splashing through the puddles like he had all the time in the world. Aleric tried to roll away, but the guards the mage brought were already on him. Pain flared through Aleric's limbs, sharp, dizzying, and the world blurred at the edges. Through the ringing in his ears he heard the mage's voice, calm and merciless.
Next time, don't run.
The last thing Aleric saw was the crimson folds of the mage's cloak, billowing like a storm cloud, before darkness slammed into him.